Hi, everybody. Welcome. I wanted to take today's meditation or this series meditation and just give you some thinking points rather than a guided meditation. And I get asked a lot about my journey as a person who once had an attitude that was very different than the attitude I have currently. And so I wanted to fill some of you in. Many of you have heard my story, you've maybe read my story on my blog, but I wanted to connect with you. I have had just a desire to make sure that my sharing with you is personal enough and that you feel connected to me. I think community is a huge aspect of yoga, and I want to make sure that you know more about me than just somebody who guides you through practice. So how I came to be a yoga teacher and an adaptive yoga teacher and a person that I believe strives to be mindful and does a pretty good job, an okay job. Prior to my experience with yoga, I was really angry. I was a blamer for everything that was wrong in my life. I had an unhappy marriage. I had 3 young children. I was 75, 80 pounds heavier than I am now. And I had no purpose. I had no meaning. I had no desire. And I remember waking up one spring morning. It was in March. March seems to be a very transformative time for me, and I don't know why. I woke up one March and I made the decision, I am done. I'm done being heavy. And at the time I was thinking physically heavy. I was done. So I started walking and I started to change my habits. And here's where I think the practice of yoga is so good at unveiling some of our unconscious habits. So I had a habit prior to this idea to be done. I had a habit of, I would return from work and I had an okay job, and I would head right to the snack cabinet and I would shove in some Cheetos, I would grab a handful of nuts, whatever. And then I had the habit of, while I was cooking dinner, to be nibbling along. And then I had the habit that while I was washing dishes, I was popping in chicken nuggets. So you can see that I was unconscious with what I was doing. I had developed these patterns and habits that I was completely unaware of until they were revealed to me. So when I decided that March morning I was going to be done being heavy, I had to create new habits. I had to change things up. So I put my walking shoes either in my car or in the doorway of my home with the dog leash. I made sure that I used the bathroom before I got home before I left work, so that there wasn't even a need to really go in the house. I grabbed my shoes, I grabbed my dog, and I went for a walk. And I started with 15 minutes, and eventually it was doing 40 minutes twice a day. So I rerouted that habit pattern. And then I moved all of my children's snacks to the cabinet above my fridge. And it required a step ladder for me to get them. By the time I hauled up the step ladder, climbed up the step ladder, I was thinking, do I really need the Cheetos? Do I really need this? I started to chew gum while I cooked dinner so that I wasn't mindlessly nibbling. And I taught my kids to do their own dishes. So I eliminated that unconscious habit. And so as I started to create these different habits, like using a salad plate for my evening meal, which I continue to do to this day, I started to become more aware of my responsibility and my thoughts around what I wanted to create for my life. I began walking 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the afternoon, and eventually it built it up to 40 minutes twice a day. And I watched as my weight just started to fall off. As I started to feel better, I started to think more about what I was eating, so I became less unconscious with my eating and more awake in my eating. And I didn't join a health club or a gym until much later into my journey of health, because I had a lot of fear around showing up in a gym. I had a lot of insecurities. I had almost an outward, I refuse to go to a gym attitude. And it was based on my own insecurities. Eventually I did join a gym, and I went to my first yoga class, and I wanted the yoga class. I wanted to go to yoga because I wanted to increase my flexibility. I wanted to touch my toes. I wanted to gain flexibility. It was all physical. And I remember I would get to class late or right at the very start of class, and I would sit at the back of the room. I would put my mat out right by the door. And so when it came time for that final relaxation, what we know as Shavasana, I would leave. I would just bolt. I'm like, oh, I don't need to be still. I don't need that. And one Saturday morning, I arrived too late to sit by the door, and I was right up front. And so I was stuck in the entire class, in the front, vulnerable, insecure. And when we got to the time of Shavasana and I had to be still with myself, it was an awakening for me to realize the reason why I wanted to leave all the time wasn't because I had things to do and I was busy. It was because I did not like the company I kept. I did not like who I was. Even fading off 60, 70 pounds, I still had so much work to do on the inside. And the thought of being with myself, even for 5 minutes alone, was terrifying. But I got it. I understood it. I had the moment in Shavasana where the integration of the mind and the body truly came together, and I got it. I got it on a deep level. I got it. And so began my yoga journey. I started to realize that I felt so amazing. And I had my youngest son at the time was 6 years old. I remember the day. I remember what I was wearing. I remember what he was wearing. I remember the season, the time of day. It's as clear as today is to me. And he said to me in his little 6-year-old voice, "Mom," and he asked a lot of questions. And I said, "What, Evan?" And he said, "You don't yell anymore." And I stopped and I said, "What do you mean by that?" And he said, "You just don't yell anymore." And so I started to realize that this practice of mindfulness, changing my habits, choosing new habits, being conscious and aware of what I was eating, what I was thinking, what I was doing, what I was saying, showing up on a yoga mat, learning who I was, really getting to know the person that I was beyond my physical form, beyond my abilities, beyond anything. I was changing, and the people that were being directly affected by this change were my children. And so my oldest son didn't get to benefit as many years of my awakeness, but that's okay. So I wanted to take this feeling that I had and share it with the world. I wanted to specifically share it with my daughter, and I was hoping that yoga would be a bridge for us as we had difficulty connecting due to her disability. And I started to teach yoga to people with disabilities, and that truly unlocked something in me that became my passion. And I took that and I expanded my teaching to typical people, because I believe that we're really no different at all. I mean, the abilities might be different, but the inclusiveness of humanity, it didn't matter if I was teaching a person in a wheelchair or an able-bodied person. I wanted to merge together these ideas of difference and coming together as inclusion. And so I found my purpose. I found what I'm here to do. I found a version of service that that feels right in my soul. Now, not everybody has to become a yoga teacher to be aligned with their soul. You don't have to be some guru. You don't have to be anything but yourself. And you have to know who you are. And you have to see and love your gifts. I have a gift as an advocate. I have a gift as a person with compassion, only when I realized I needed to be that way with me. So for this week's meditation, contemplation, I would invite you to ask yourself some questions. What habits have I created that aren't in alignment with the life I want? Maybe that's something to do with your eating habits or your sleep habits or your addiction to work. Still working on that. What are your habits that you're creating, that you're choosing, that are out of alignment with the life you want to create? And so I want you to think about that, and I want you to see if you can unveil something within yourself that's resistant to being awake. And when we can recognize that, I had fear operating. I had insecurity operating. I had a lack of purpose operating that led me to make these decisions. Now I ask myself when faced with a decision, is what I'm about to say yes to going to create the life I want? And it's a work in progress. I am a person that says yes to everything except myself. So I'm working on it. But that's my direction. So I want you to think about that. What habits are you choosing that are out of alignment with the life you want to have? And then I want you to contemplate the idea that you create your life, that you create your happiness, that there is no, when I get this, I'll be happy. When I have a house, I'll be happy. When I have a mate, when I have a better job, when I have more income, when I lose 20 pounds. See where that is, because your happiness is today and you get to create the life that you want. And we'll talk a little bit about visualization and creating a life that you want in the coming weeks. First, identify habits and patterns that are getting in the way for you, and sit with it and be willing to be with yourself and to sit still. If you find yourself rushing through that final relaxation of a yoga practice, ask yourself why. Why don't you want to be alone with yourself? And there will be wisdom. Journal about it, doodle about it. You know, I love to journal in doodles and in images. So ask the question and then listen. And you will be amazed at what your soul will reveal if you're willing. So that's the meditation this week. It's a little bit about me, a little bit about my story. I'm a work in progress. I'm constantly polishing to be the best individual that I can be for myself and for others. So enjoy looking at it, enjoy looking at the habits, and I'll see you really soon.